Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Michelle Beebe. I am the Multimedia Director here at the Change Companies. We provide evidence-based solutions for behavior change using interactive journaling. And for over 30 years, we've supported our clients in providing the best behavior change programming to the people that they serve. So today we're going to talk about getting unstuck, and Scott's going to walk us through how do you help people work through the ambivalence that they might be experiencing. Before we begin, I first want to thank those that provided feedback from our last webinar. Your insights were very helpful and they will be used to help make improvements for future webinars. We've decided to keep the presentation to 30 minutes for those that are on a tight schedule, but we've also decided to hold a specific Q&A at the end of the presentation for those that would like to participate, and we'll try to do that between 10 and 15 minutes. If you submitted questions during the registration process, I have a list of those compiled for us to kind of address as many as we can during that time. But if you have additional questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to type them into the questions box within your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll get through as many of those as well that we can with the time that we have with Scott at the end of the presentation. Lastly, I would love to introduce to you Scott Covert. Some of you had the pleasure of meeting him on the last webinar, and some of you had the pleasure of attending one of his many trainings. Scott has Scott is the Vice President of Training here at the Change Companies and has offered over 300 live trainings to providers in addiction treatment, mental health, impaired driving, parole and probation, youth intervention, and many, many more. So I would like to hand over the presentation to Scott Covert at this time.
Thank you, Michelle, for another wonderful introduction. I'm always impressed by myself when I hear you introduce me that way. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today as we talk about ambivalence, or that debate that we all have in our heads where we're thinking of opposites around any kind of behavior change that we're considering making. So we all experience it. All of us experience ambivalence, and ambivalence is the easiest place to get stuck on the road to change. So if you're in the business of helping people with behavior change, you most likely deal with ambivalence every day. And if you're a human being, you most likely experience ambivalence every day. There we go. So I think we experience ambivalence as having mixed feelings. That would be another way to think about ambivalence, or opposing thoughts, because ambivalence is kind of a big word. I don't know that it's in everybody's vocabulary, even though we do all experience it. And normally we experience that in the contemplative state of change, or where we're thinking about change. And unless we reconcile our ambivalence, really nothing much changes. We're pretty much stuck in the status quo. So, on any particular day, I am certainly ambivalent. And it can be simple things like, what am I going to have for lunch today? Am I going to have that wonderful, healthy salad? Or am I going to have that big, greasy burger with fries? And that ambivalence is ambivalence of an even bigger change, which is my primary care doctor telling me, Scott, you really need to think about changing your diet and becoming more plant-based as you get older. That's a much healthier diet for you to have. And so, is that ambivalence really any different than your clients? So the individual that is making a decision today, do I stay in the treatment center and work on my abstinence from heroin? Or do I listen to the million brain cells in my brain telling me that I need to walk out of this place right now and call my drug dealer and make the sickness go away? Or the individual who has to decide, do I spend Sunday with my family at the zoo? Or do I help my best friend steal that coil of copper from his job site? And really, it comes down to those little changes that we make each and every day that determines the direction we take in life. So, how we help ourselves and others work through ambivalence is what we'll be discussing. I'll talk you through several techniques that I've picked up on over time. Working with all of you, I really get all my ideas from you. So I'm just sharing what I've learned from others or what I've practiced on myself. And a lot of them will be basic strategies that we can all use, but I want to keep you pros in mind as well, people that have been doing this for a while. And speaking of pros, if you have any techniques, that come up other than the ones I'm talking about, I think you can put them into the question area. And as I see those pop up, I'll try to pause after each one of the techniques that I talk about and see if I'm picking up any that you have, and I'll give you try to give you an honorable mention. And hopefully I'm not trying to get too technical and I mess myself up. Okay, so on where you go. Here's tip number 1, ask evocative questions. This is about allowing the person you're helping to talk themselves into making positive change. And that's the best change, right? When we can evoke it from the individual. We're our own best experts. We know better than anyone else what we need to do. And sometimes it's just hard to see. So remember, clients listen to themselves, and the more they listen, they listen to themselves much more than they're going to listen to you. So we can't fix people. We want to allow individuals to decide for themselves when they're ready to make changes and how they make those changes. And so when a person's moving towards change, you'll hear statements like, I've really got to do something about this, or I really want things to be different. And what you're hearing are their desires or their abilities or their reasons for making change, their needs for making change. And many of you know that acronym as DARN, which is considered change talk in motivational interviewing. So, look for those type of questions that will help people be more future focused and move towards change. But first, let's talk about the questions you don't want to ask, the questions that disengage people, that actually move them more towards locking in on the status quo and focusing on their sustaining talk, or what keeps them from moving forward. So one would be, why don't you want to? Like, we don't hear that a lot, why don't you want to make a change? Why don't you want to change your drug using habit? Or why can't you? Why can't you, for your family, why can't you do this? Or why haven't you? After all this time and all the suffering you've been through, why haven't you changed by now? And why don't you, right? If you cared, you'd make these changes. Why don't you change? And then, of course, the ultimate killer statement is, you should, right? You should do this, you should do that. And, all these questions tend to put the individual in the position of defending themselves and defending the status quo. So instead of moving towards change, they listen to themselves and they don't change at all. Instead, you might want to ask, how do you want your life to be different, like 1 year from now? Which leads the person typically to I want statements. Or you might ask, if you decided to make this change, how could you do it? This leads the person to talk more about their own abilities to make the change. So we want to evoke from individuals. But there's a challenge to this. And one way that we help people balance their pros and cons for change, their ambivalence, is to let them do a decisional balance. So a classic decisional balance encourages the person to list all of their pros or change talk, and then all of their cons or sustaining talk, so that they can look at that and make a decision as to what they want to do. If you're doing this with someone who's already leaning to change, they've kind of already made up their mind and know that it's important for them to move to change, it could definitely help them move in that direction. It just affirms or gives them the information that they need to make that change. But the problem with it is, and what you want to be careful about, is that when the person lists all their reasons for staying the same and they list all their reasons for making changes, oftentimes that comes out that it's equal. They weighed the same, and so the person's the same place that they were. They did a decisional balance, but they're still not making any changes. They're still staying the same. They're still stuck. So a pro tip on this, all of you can use it, is to be thoughtful about when you encourage a person to name their reasons for not making changes. So you can modify this approach by only evoking the change side of the equation. So ask questions like, what would be the worst thing that would happen if you don't make a change? Or what would be, even if you're not ready to change today, if you were to change, what would be 3 good reasons for making that change? And by doing that, you're automatically tilting towards change. You're getting the person to be future focused, and that can help them with reconciling their ambivalence. The second tip is to focus on values. So another way to tilt toward change is to take a look in the mirror, the old man in the mirror, and do my behaviors match my values? For example, say my number 1 value is my family. Everything is about my family. I love my family, and I live for my family, but I'm doing a lot of unhealthy things that might shorten my time here on earth. And so in that, I might very well find the motivation to make the changes I need to. Or it can help me develop the discrepancy between my value and my behavior. So well, I'll just disclose now, I was a heavy smoker for over 30 years. And, it wasn't, how helpful is that if I'm telling my kids or my grandkids, look, you never want to get hooked on nicotine. You never want to be a smoker. It's horrible. It's really hard to quit, and it's really unhealthy. And if I'm giving that lecture while I'm sucking on my vape and big clouds of vape is coming out of my head, it's not helpful. So, well, since I told you I was a smoker, I was always looking for people that were able to quit, and how did you do it? I was always looking for the easy fix, not the hard part of change. What's the easier, more gentler route? And so this person that was a smoker like me quit, and I said, well, how'd you do it? And he said it was kind of easy, actually. I picked my kids up, my elementary school kids, every day after school at 3:30, and on this particular day, it was a rainy day, and I took off to pick them up, and I realized I didn't have my cigarettes with me, and I thought, well, what's the harm if I just stop and pick up a pack of smokes on the way? And of course, I got there late, and there's my kids alone. Buses had already left, and they're standing in the pouring rain, looking very, very sad. And that was it. That was enough for that individual, that they were able to put the smokes down and find the motivation to overcome all the difficulties in quitting cigarettes. The challenge here, though, is the values can be two-edged. So let's stick with the family value, family being important. What if my family makes their living dealing drugs? And my job in the family is to help cut the dope and run the drugs. And so I'm rewarded, and I feel good and helpful in my family by doing that job. So that family value would actually keep me stuck in that negative behavior. We see it all the time, where parts of the country like Appalachia, where coal mining was the business, was the job for years, decades. And it's cultural. I mean, that's what we do. And that's the land we live on. And now it's depressed. Those jobs are gone and probably aren't coming back. while right up the road from where I am right now in Carson City, they're looking for over 300 people to work at a factory where they're offering $21 an hour to start. You need absolutely no skills coming in, and they're paying full benefits. But people don't want to move because they're tied to the land and that culture. So what do we do on that when that's the thing? So your pro tip on that is, can we explore other values? So sticking with that family idea, if part of my family value is providing for my family, and I see that things aren't going well, and I want a better life for my children, and I want to be a good provider of my family, that might be enough motivation for me to overcome the fear and the anxiety and the loss of leaving, the land my ancestors grew on. So you can still work that value, but make sure we're not focusing on a value that can keep people stuck. Tip number 3, focus on the future. So we can increase intrinsic motivation when we help people with goals. So if you think about it, the gap between where I am today and where I'd like to be in the future, in that gap lies intrinsic motivation. The bigger the gap, typically the more the motivation. So if my personal goal is to see my favorite grandchild grow up and go to college, and I even want to help them with that, that might be the motivation for me to listen to my doctor and start eating a healthy plant-based diet and exercising, which comes with great effort and pain. That could be it for me. But if I have no goal, if I have no purpose, then not much motivation. And oftentimes I ask people, what are your goals? And they say, well, get through tomorrow or get through the week. And while I'm a true believer in one day at a time, that doesn't mean that I don't have long and short-term goals, that I have a purpose in getting through today. So focusing on the future is also a great way to get people's emotions involved in the process of change. Encourage them to picture how they'll feel when in their future. How will you feel if you make these changes and your future comes true? And if they picture themselves a year from now, what would you like to see? Encourage them to be detailed as possible about the future that they want to experience. And then you can always look at the obstacles. Okay, so if that's what you want, what would be the roadblocks? What things do you think might come up that you can have a plan for? And a fun way to do this is to visualize your future using a crystal ball. So originally the flip chart was a prop, but I'm going to use it as long as I'm bringing this up, right? So it's easy to draw a crystal ball, and I like stick figures, as you can tell here, so I can start visualizing my future. And I've got 14 grandkids now all around the country, and I want to spend more time with my grandkids and travel with them or travel to see them. So you don't have to be Picasso to draw. But why is it important to visualize your future? Because if you can't visualize, the more you visualize it, the more motivation it provides. But if I can't visualize the future, why would I have a plan to get there? So it's just a fun thing to do. All right. Now, if you're encouraging a client to set positive goals, you'll want to be aware that goals that are too big can be demotivating. Likewise, goals that are too small have no motivation at all. So if there's any juvenile probation officers out there, and I know there are, right? A lot of the times your youth, when you say, well, where do you want to be in 5 years? They're like, oh, I'm gonna be playing in the NBA, or I'm gonna be a music mogul and be a billionaire. So those might seem like they're not achievable, like they're too big. But it's possible if you help them by breaking those big goals down into smaller, doable goals, right? So a big long-term goal, break it down into smaller 3 to 5 short-term goals that are achievable. Because if they can achieve those smaller goals, it builds on success, right? I get more confidence. I start to see the rewards of achieving those goals, and that can be helpful. The opposite, though, is if there's no chance, I might start out highly motivated to make it happen, but when I quickly see that it's just not going to come easy, no instant gratification, then I give up. And you give up enough times and you're going to end up demoralized. And demoralized people don't change. So how does that play out in the work that you do? You might hear somebody say, "Nope, this is it. I'm done with this. I'm never going to drink or drug again, ever, ever. This was the last time." Which, it's a wonderful thing to hear, but is it realistic? And or what are you going to do to make that happen? So something big like that, long-term sobriety, it might be more doable if you help them set smaller goals. Like, how about you can stay sober for a month or a week or 24 hours, or for some of us, 1 hour, you know, uh, do things that you can accomplish. So the pro tip on this one is help people with SMART goals. It's a skill, so how many people listening to me right now do those, set those long-term goals? And I was just looking to see if anybody had any other tips on this one. Yeah, most of us don't. We're too busy with things going on. So SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, rewarding, timely. I've heard trackable. But if people practice that skill, it can be really helpful for the rest of their lives. So something you can, if you're not doing it, you may very well, but if not, give it a try. Another one along the same lines is, what if the person can't articulate the goal? And that can be really challenging, right? Like the person says, I don't know what I want. I don't want anything. I don't have any goals. And they're just unsure of what they want to achieve. Here's try the miracle question. So for those of you that don't know the miracle question, it goes something like this. At some time today, all of you are going to get tired and fall asleep. And while you're sleeping, a miracle occurs. And of course, when you wake up, you don't know a miracle occurred because it happened while you were sleeping. So how would you know that something changed? How would you know a miracle occurred? What would be different? And this helps people talk about their desires, right? Changes they want to see in their lives, maybe the job they want to have, how they'd like to see their relationship. That's really goal setting. That's being future focused. And, and then you can help them turn those dreams into reality, by breaking it down again and working on it and encouraging them to work on it. One more thing to remember when you're helping someone set goals is to pay attention to where they are in the change process. It's usually not helpful to expect people to leap from the state of ambivalence where we're having this debate in our heads whether we change or don't, directly into action. And you need that middle part. Again, the old, fail to plan, plan to fail. So what's a good example of that we all recognize? How about New Year's resolutions? We're all familiar with that. I think I read somewhere that maybe 30% of New Year's resolutions work, and or people actually follow through and do their New Year's resolution. The rest of us, at some point, go right back into our old behavior. And helping people again identify what it is that they'd like to do, and find the supports that come with strategies for overcoming challenges. It's good work. So don't rush. I saw some questions. I think at the end, Michelle's gonna, she's keeping track of questions, but how do we know when to push a person? They've spent enough time in ambivalence. When is it time to push them into making changes? You can't. If you push them, they might comply if you've got some authority over them, but it has nothing to do with long-term behavior change. What you can do is nudge them into start thinking what their goals are and start laying out a plan for how they're going to achieve those goals and looking at what their options are. Okay, fourth tip, encourage people to do their own research. What's that about? It's just a way for people to accumulate more reasons for why they might want to make changes, to educate themselves, to raise their consciousness. So encourage them to gather information maybe about the risks of their current behavior or the benefits of making changes. This benefits them into really getting focused on what would be most important to them, and it takes us out of the equation of telling them what they should be doing. And so it's really helpful too for people that minimize their current experience, like, yeah, I know I've overdosed a few times, but it was no big deal, right? The more we learn about it, the better it goes. And but again, you don't want to tell people, hydration is really important these days. I hear a lot of people are always telling me, Scott, you don't drink enough water. You need to drink more. I see people walking around with these giant like hydro flasks. I don't even think I'm strong enough to carry some of those. And they look like they carry a gallon of water around with them. And I get plenty of water. I drink coffee that's made of water. And so, but if I started logging my behavior, I'd quickly realize I really don't drink much water at all. And I might see that those headaches that I get are during those periods when I'm not hydrating at all. And, connecting those dots starts to help me think, all right, you know what? I do need to drink some more water. And I'm going to start doing that tomorrow, maybe next Monday. What's the challenge here? What's some things that you want to think about? What if the person is doing the research and they only look for information that supports their current belief? Like you say, I might have a marijuana problem and I should research my marijuana problem, and I go to High Times, which tells me I don't have a marijuana program at all, that marijuana is good for me. It cures all sorts of illnesses and I'm doing just fine. Or how about that red wine? It's good for your heart. It's got all those antioxidants in it. So I missed the part that says 5 ounces of wine a day and equate that to a bottle or two. So, just be careful when you use this strategy and make sure it fits your client. And also something that you can really do to help the individual is to provide them with the resources for where they could go to look for information. So SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, always a good one. The NIAAA, National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, the Center for Disease Control, at least they'll get accurate information. They may still go to their others, but then they can look at the two and still make their choices. Remember, change is always autonomous. We can't decide for people and we can't make them do things. They have to decide on their own if that's what they want to do. The 5th tip is to encourage people to try on a change or sample a behavior. We can practice new behaviors even if we've not made a decision to make that change or committed to making that change. And oftentimes practicing things help us tilt towards change. Some of you may know this as act as if, or my favorite, fake it till you make it. I've used that one quite a bit in my life. So this process can be applied both mentally and physically. And I used it truly recently. So all the people that didn't train last year because of COVID, are all ready to have in-person trainings again, and everybody would like them now. So I have all these trainings stretching out in front of me, and so I found myself saying things like, I have to go to Omaha and train. And then right behind that, I was like, I have to go to my grandson's basketball tournament this weekend. So when am I going to get time to prepare? Oh, yeah, that's right. I have to do this webinar next Tuesday, and I got to get ready for that. And I could really feel, my anxiety starting to grow, and my lack of motivation. So what did I do? I made a simple change. I started saying, I get to. Like, man, I get to go to Omaha and train in person after a year of doing it online like this. And I get to go to my grandson's basketball tournament. I'm not out of town. I'll be here to see him. And I get to do this webinar on ambivalence. And truly, my whole attitude changed in a positive direction. Likewise, you can practice physically. Oftentimes we think of it like sports, right? Like if I want to get better at golf, I go hit 100 golf balls a day, or I want to get better at batting, I go to the batting cage and practice batting. But what about these negative behaviors? How does that work? It works fine. So probation, you're aware of this. Judges for adults anyways often say abstinence from all substances that are mind altering. And so people try their best. They try to comply, and they stay sober. They remain abstinent. And but that doesn't mean that in their minds they're abstinent. In their minds, they still may be very pre-contemplative or ambivalent at best, just thinking about changing. And so, but they're sampling sobriety. See, this is the neat thing. They're actually practicing sobriety while they're being abstinent, and they're getting the reward of sobriety. Relationships start to get better. People's health gets better. They get better at their job. Work is easier. Work is better, more fulfilling. The problem is that they don't make the connection. So this is your challenge and your tip. Help people connect those dots. So I used to think all my coworkers were out to get me. Backstabbers, want my job, mean people. And then I quit drinking, and lo and behold, they were so nice. They all changed just for me. Turns out they were very pleasant and helpful, wanted the best for me, and I actually kind of saw it that way, but it wasn't true, right? It was me that changed. So help people see that a lot of that good stuff that's coming their way is really because of how they're being and how they've changed. And that can reinforce it. If you want more of what you're getting, keep doing what you're doing. If you'd like your misery reimbursed, just go back to your old way of doing things. Another challenge or tip to think about is, what if people practice things incorrectly, which can happen? So this is where what I believe is called social modeling comes in, or role modeling. And all of you can do this to help your clients. You might have to find someone in your personal life to help you role play, but you definitely want to do this with all the people that you're helping with behavior change. So first you want to model what it is that you're doing. Teach it, model it. Then we practice it. We rehearse or we role play and get feedback on that. So we start to gain some confidence that I can do this skill. Then encourage the people to go out and use it, and but ask them to report back. How did it go? So we can give more feedback. And the more you practice, of course, the more it becomes your new habit, or your new normal. And lo and behold, things start to change, right? We're changing. All right, the last one. Number 6 and final tip is help people find a support or social support network. And this can be really helpful for people that are stuck in contemplation, is to be around people that had similar difficulties and were able to overcome them and are now living very happy, joyful, healthy lives. Typically, we think of this as Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, a 12-step group, but there's plenty of other ones. There's Celebrate Recovery, Smart Recovery. But somebody told me once that there's like 30 or 40 12-step programs out there. So there's a support group for every behavior that we have. And so, helping people with that is good, but, it doesn't have to be just for, substances or eating issues that we have or other health issues. How do we use social support in a normal situation? Continuing on with Scott's diet, Scott's work on all things being healthy and eating healthy food, I've done a lot of research on it, and I know that a plant-based diet is really good for blood pressure and heart and your vascular system. And but I grew up in a meat and potato family. The good old traditional American diet, and green stuff is for bunny rabbits. But my doctor's pretty clear on it. If you want to achieve your goal of living a longer life and having a great quality of life in older age, you're really going to want to do this diet. Okay, so what does social support, how does that work in this situation? I instead of going to the Longhorn steakhouse to practice my vegan diet, I might go to Yelp and look up vegan and vegetarian restaurants. And then I might pick one that's got 4 or 5 stars and go give it a try. And of course, I'm a little bit apprehensive walking into the restaurant, but I discover that when I go in, wow, people don't look all depressed and sickly. Just the opposite. They're looking all pretty good and they're all happy and having a good time. And then I tell the waiter, hey, I'm a newbie. What should I order? And give some suggestions, and I order the food and I eat it, and lo and behold, how amazing. It's really, really good. So see my thinking starting to change now that there's possibilities here. And so, it just helps me, again, move towards maybe I can do this. Some things to think about, though, on this is that what if it was a bad experience? What if I chose a 2-star because it also had only $1 sign instead of $4 signs, and I'm cheap? And I go and it's a really bad experience. It just reaffirms my beliefs, right? Yeah, like, see, this stuff is terrible. Nobody wants to eat this diet. So the pro tip on this is if you're encouraging social support, really encourage people to have more than one option. 2 options are better than 1, and 3 options are better than 2. And then statistically, it's pretty flat after that. But if it's the restaurant story, have 3 restaurants, and maybe pick different cultures that are more vegetarian based to try different food. Try Thai food, try a different type of vegetarian food, and find the one you like. Likewise, if it's you're suggesting meetings, people go to meetings, AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery. Don't go to just one meeting, because you go to that one meeting and people are mean to you and they're yelling at you, and or you mention drugs in an AA meeting and they tell you need that other program. You're not going to go back. You're going to think this was a horrible experience. It wasn't helpful at all. But don't give up. go to 3 or 4 or 5 meetings, make that commitment. And if you do that, I'll guarantee you'll find one where you're more comfortable, where you hear things that you want, where people are more caring and want to help you with change. So that's the tip. Encourage people to do more than one, have more than one option. All right. So I tried figuring out this, looking at the questions or looking at suggestions. And there's one, the big rock. But I can't read much more than that. So I apologize for that. Maybe Michelle was able to catch some of those and we can share them at a later time. But just remember as we close here and go to questions, remember that ambivalence is normal. So we might think people are trying to make our lives miserable by not deciding to change. But also remember, and I would absolutely share this with people, that it's progress. It's normal to be thinking of opposites, but it's way better than pre-contemplation. It's way better than, I don't think I need to make any changes because I don't think that's a problem, or I don't care that there's better things waiting for me out there. I am not going to change, period, right? If we're thinking about change, that's a good thing. And hopefully you picked up some tips today that will help you help other individuals reconcile that ambivalence and move to bigger and better things in life. Okay. Back to you, I guess. Michelle, is that it? Are we up to questions and
Yeah.
answers? All right.
I'm going to I have a list of all the additional pro tips that came from our attendees. So I will just put that in the general chat for everyone to see. So if other people want to take that information, they can. In the meantime, Scott, I think we're ready to head into our Q&A. There's some really good questions that we have. So let me deliver the first question, which is from Stacy. And she asks, how do you get unstuck when you realize that change is becoming difficult?
Oh, how do you get unstuck? Well, hopefully you picked up some tips today on how to do it. One thing you can do is phone a friend, like literally work with someone else, because if the conversation is always just our own, and it's just, it's like a squirrel cage going around circular thinking, it's hard to move forward. So talking with another person, but pick somebody who's not going to tell you, oh, I know exactly how you do it, or this is how I did it, or you should do this. Remember, we're back to those killer questions that shut people down. But somebody who's willing to listen and help you go through or reevaluate. Is making that change still important, or have things changed and it's not as important as it was? So maybe reevaluate.
Great.
And again, if anybody else has any other ideas, throw those in there in those answer questions, and maybe we can share those. Good. What's another one?
This is from Lucinda, and she's asking, how do I help my staff identify ambivalence versus resistance?
Yeah, good. Yeah, resistance. Well, they're kind of, two sides of the same coin. It's really ambivalent. So if we're being resistant, what we might say is resistant, it's that people are putting more weight on their status quo or their sustaining talk, and that's where their interest lies. And so they're not necessarily being resistant. Some people would call it discord, or they have a disagreement. So what you want them to be is whatever, sober, or stop stealing things, or whatever it is that we're working on. So they seem like they're resistant. It's just that they've got things that are more important to them, like staying loaded and keeping their friends who are important to them. So I don't think it's so much identifying it as you're just hearing, you're hearing ambivalence.
Right.
And again, that's a good thing. So maybe some of the tips we talked about earlier will help you with that.
All right. So next question comes from Christy, and she is asking, how far is too far when trying to move people out of ambivalence? When or how do you know when to step away?
Oh, well, again, we can't really force change. And, some people change quickly. Maybe they were already well on their path and they just needed the little bit of nudge to reinforce what they're doing was right. Other people, people can be chronic contemplators. They can be stuck in ambivalence for decades. Think of those smokers, that we've tried, dozens of times to do it. So I don't know that you can push people into making changes as much as, helping people understand that it's a normal place to be and maybe help them sort out that ambivalence, those arguments for and against, and see if they can't move towards change. Again, maybe using any one of the tips that we talked about today. But I don't think pushing people works. They'll just push back.
Right. The next question is from Jeff. When a client commits to a new idea, then begins backing out, how do I refocus them?
So they commit, that's it, I'm quitting for life. And then I change my mind. Okay, well, I think that's a good description of the trans-theoretical model, right? Stages and processes of change. Again, that's normal. So sometimes we say, well, it's relapse, but it's really part of the process of recycling. We take a step forward, we move towards change. Oftentimes we see the closer we move towards change, we see the disadvantages of change, and we take a step back. We start to move back towards not changing. As we move back towards not changing, we see the disadvantages of not changing, and we start to move forward again. And that's the normal process, is that back and forth. Again, if you have the person engaged, the last webinar was all on the therapeutic alliance and getting people engaged in the process of their own self change. As long as they're engaged, then we can continue to have that conversation and use these different techniques to help people reconcile their ambivalence without telling them, hey, look, you just need to make a decision and move forward, right? Enough is enough. It won't work. They'll say, see you later, and out the door they'll go. Any more? Do we have time for more?
Yeah,
I wasn't watching the time. I think I ran late today, but
I
go
think we
ahead.
have a few more really good questions, in particular the things that you addressed today during the presentation. This
Good.
question is from James, and he wants to know, what do you do when the miracle question leads to something that is impossible, undoing the past or bringing back the deceased, as an example?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So again, this is where being client-centered, outcome-informed is critical. And so, I wouldn't on day one say, hey, let's start off with the miracle question. Hopefully, you know enough about the individual, you can see where they're kind of getting stuck. So if trauma is issued, this is why the big push has been on for years now. We need to be trauma informed. So if you know that that's part of the person's makeup and where they're stuck, yeah, you don't want to evoke that, but just, for people that aren't in that situation, the miracle question might work. Now, if it goes sideways on you and you didn't see it coming, okay, then you're going to have to deal with that and help people work through that, and then go back to, okay, now what do you want to have done in the future? But if that's how we found out where the trauma was, if we're not skilled in working with trauma, then you'd want to do a referral and help find someone that could help that individual. Again, these are just my off the cuff, top of the head thoughts. If people have different ideas out there, you're way smarter than me. So please share with us. That'll be helpful. Good. More?
Yes, actually. So this one is related to when you were talking about goals and kind of looking out for, goals that are too big. Kelly wants to know, you talked about some goals being too small and leading to giving up or boredom. How would you recommend getting clients to think bigger, broader, or reframing to what they want instead of what they don't want?
Yeah, good. So that's why I like to visualize, your future. And I'd like to take credit for that, but we use that exercise in a lot of our journals that we publish, as you know, Michelle. And so I've used that many times with adolescents and adults, and it goes pretty well because everybody has some kind of dream, something they think about in those moments before we fall asleep at night. And some people journal about it is another good technique for thinking about what we'd like to do in the future. But in the immediate, like if I'm under probation and I'm a juvenile, I'm not really thinking about my future past how do I get out of juvenile hall and trying to convince my mom to let me back in the house so I could live in the basement, which is tricked out with a great TV and an Xbox. There's not a lot of motivation for changing anything that brought me to that situation because I got a place to go. And right, so that's why we need to encourage bigger thoughts. And sometimes it's just asking, right? Like that's great. So there's a good short-term goal. So you have a safe place to live and you're okay. But what about after that? How do you see yourself taking care of yourself? What happens if mom's not there anymore? What would you want to do? It's just asking those kind of open-ended questions. And then, I didn't mention it, but it's really important. Always think in terms of affirming and reflecting. The best conversation you can have with people is listening and just affirming, what the person wants, validating in a sense, and reflecting. Let them hear what they're saying because oftentimes that's enough to generate, the larger thought.
Well, thank you, Scott. We kind of come to just under the hour. I know this has been really fun. As a reminder to all the attendees that are here, we will send an email link with the recording for you to watch at a later time. And don't forget to download. There's a PDF handout in your GoToWebinar control panel that kind of summarizes all the key points and strategies that Scott has kind of delivered here today. And lastly, as always, interactive journals from the change companies are a great way to meet your clients where they're at, especially during their own change process. And even more so important when you're working through those periods of ambivalence with them. So you can learn more by visiting our website at changecompanies.net, or feel free to give us a call anytime at 888-889-8866, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about other behavior change solutions or even interactive journaling specifically. In the meantime, thank you so much again for your time and participating today, and we will see you next time. Have a great day.
Indeed. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.